My dad's parents, my dad's mom was a trapeze artist in France, and my dad's dad was an Irish vaudevillian, and when my dad was a kid, he was shipped off.
For nearly a decade, from 1974 to 1983, American families gathered in their living rooms to visit a simpler time. They traveled back to the 19th century American frontier, to the small town of Walnut Grove, Minnesota. They were there to spend an hour with the Ingalls family, the wholesome and loving pioneers at the heart of Little House on the Prairie. At the very center of this family was Charles Ingalls, Pa, portrayed by the charismatic and beloved Michael Landon. With his warm smile and steady wisdom, Pa Ingalls wasn't just a character, he was an ideal. He was America's favorite father, a symbol of integrity who guided his family through hardship with love. And right there at his side, looking up at him with a mix of adoration and mischief, was his daughter, Laura Ingalls, affectionately known as Half Pint. Played by the young and bubbly Melissa Gilbert, Laura was the nation's daughter, and her relationship with Pa was the emotional core of the series. Week after week, audiences watched their bond, a perfect portrait of fatherly love. It felt real, authentic, and pure. For Melissa Gilbert, a young girl growing up in the whirlwind of Hollywood, it was much more than just acting. It was a lifeline. He was America's favorite father, and she was the daughter the nation watched grow up. For Melissa Gilbert, Michael Landon wasn't just a co-star, he was the father she had always longed for. Their connection, both on and off, the set, seemed to be a perfect reflection of the values they portrayed on screen. It was a bond that millions of fans cherished. But for decades, a painful truth lay hidden behind those cherished memories. With the perspective that only time can bring, Melissa Gilbert is now sharing the full story of the deep and lasting rift that shattered her perfect image of her TV dad and led to years of silent heartbreak. The story that unfolded behind the scenes was far more complicated and far more painful than anyone could have imagined. It was a story of love and disillusionment, of a bond that felt unbreakable until the moment it was broken. To understand just how deep Melissa Gilbert's bond with Michael Landon went, you first have to understand the void he filled in her life. Born into the complex world of Hollywood, Melissa was adopted just one day after her birth by actor Paul Gilbert and his wife, Barbara Crane. While she had a loving family, her world was fractured at a young age. In 1976, when Melissa was just 11, her father took his own life. The loss was devastating, leaving an unfillable hole in the heart of a young girl just starting to navigate the pressures of fame. It was into this void that Michael Landon stepped. On the set of Little House, he was more than just the producer, director, and star. He was its fatherly heart. And for Melissa, he became the anchor she so desperately needed. From the very beginning, their connection was obvious. He didn't just direct her. He nurtured her. He saw a spark in the 9-year-old girl during auditions and knew he'd found his Laura. That instinct went far beyond the camera. He gave her the nickname Half Pint, a term of endearment that followed her off screen. Landon saw a child who needed more than a boss. She needed a mentor, a protector, a father, and he embraced that role. Their relationship blossomed into a unique friendship that set Gilbert apart from the rest of the cast. As she recalled, "I was the only cast member who regularly socialized with him and his family. This wasn't a casual thing, it was a real family bond. The lines between the TV, Ingalls family, and the real-life Landon family began to blur. We all vacationed together during spring break to Hawaii, the same hotel every year," Gilbert shared. "Mike's kids went to the same school I went to. I slept over at their house all the time. They slept over at my house." For Melissa, the Landon household became a second home. Michael Landon wasn't just playing a father on TV. In many ways, he was being one to her. He gave her advice about boys, teased her during photo shoots by shoving her pigtails up her nose to make her laugh, and created an environment where she felt safe and cherished. He was the one she looked to between takes, the one whose approval she sought. He was, as she has stated, one of the most important influences on her life. For a young girl grappling with the loss of her own father, Michael Landon was a godsend. She had found her pa, and in his presence, she felt she had found a family that could never be broken. On the surface, the Little House on the Prairie set was a well-oiled machine, driven by the singular vision of Michael Landon. He was, by all accounts, the quarterback. As the executive producer, writer, director, and star, what he said went. His control was legendary, but for years it fostered a family-like atmosphere and produced a show beloved by millions. For a young Melissa Gilbert, this environment was her world. Desperate for connection and eager to please the man she idolized, she thrived. But as she grew from a child into a teenager, the flawless facade of her hero began to show tiny cracks. The man who was a master of control on set was, in his personal life, wrestling with forces that were beginning to spiral. The whispers started quietly. On-set insiders like co-star Karen Grassel, who played Ma Ingalls, noticed a change. Landon started talking openly, almost boastfully, about his revived libido and the benefits of bee pollen for an aging man. The comments felt strange coming from the man who championed family values. It soon became clear what was fueling this newfound energy. Her name was Cindy Clerico. Clerico was a young stand-in on the show, decades younger than Landon. The cast began to notice them spending more and more time together. Landon, usually all business, would talk to Clerico longer than he talked to anyone else, Grassel recalled. A shared book, a lingering conversation, these were the small signs that a massive scandal was brewing. For Melissa, the shift was confusing. In her memoir, Prairie Tale, she recounted a specific moment that broke the spell. While she was filming The Miracle Worker, which used some of the same crew, Landon came to visit. He would usually make a beeline for his half pint, but on one particular day, he walked right past her, his focus entirely on Cindy. As a teenage Gilbert watched them, she slowly began to understand what was happening. It was a quiet, personal realization where the man she saw as a father suddenly became just a man, with secrets that had nothing to do with her. The atmosphere on set, once a place of comfort, became incredibly awkward. The cast and crew knew Landon's wife, Lynn, no. They'd been to their home. Lynn was part of the Little House family. Now, this affair was unfolding in plain sight, creating a tension no one knew how to address. For Melissa, it was Landon's life and his relationship with Melissa Gilbert forever. The affair with Cindy Clerico was no longer a secret. It was a fact that ripped through the Little House community and eventually landed in the tabloids. For a man who built his career on being a devoted family man, the hypocrisy was staggering. When the confrontation finally came, it was dramatic. Lynn No, Landon's wife of nearly 2 decades, reportedly discovered the affair and confronted him. The marriage couldn't survive the infidelity. In 1982, the same year Little House was nearing its end, Michael and Lynn divorced. A year later, he married Cindy Clerico, who was already pregnant with their child. For Melissa Gilbert, this wasn't just celebrity gossip. It was a deep, personal betrayal. The man she looked up to, her surrogate father, had just shattered the very values he'd taught her to cherish. It wasn't just the affair, it was the destruction of the Pa Ingalls ideal. Charles Ingalls would never abandon his family. He would never betray his wife. Michael Landon, the man, had just proven he was not Charles Ingalls. The pain for Gilbert was complex. She felt a deep loyalty to Lynn and the Landon children she had grown up with. Now, her surrogate family was imploding, and the man at the center of it was the one she had trusted completely. The choice he made left deep scars. She later said it felt like losing her father all over again. First, to a tragic death, and now, to a disillusionment that felt just as final. The betrayal also had professional consequences. It's widely reported that Landon lost lucrative endorsement deals with family-focused brands. His carefully curated public image was tarnished. Landon himself tried to downplay it, telling People magazine in 1985 that you don't dissolve a relationship to go to bed with someone 20 years younger, insisting his marriage was already failing. But that did little to soothe the sting of betrayal felt by those closest to him. For Melissa, the conflict was too much. She worked with Landon until the show ended, keeping up a fragile sense of normalcy. But inside, she was navigating a deep sense of loss for the man she thought she knew. When Landon married Clerico, Gilbert didn't go to the wedding. It was a quiet but powerful statement. The idyllic chapter was over. When the final episode of Little House on the Prairie aired, the forced politeness between Melissa Gilbert and Michael Landon stopped too. For nearly a decade, he had been a constant in her life. She thought their powerful bond would last beyond the show. She was wrong. The end of the series marked the beginning of a stark and painful silence. The closeness they once shared just evaporated. The phone calls stopped. The invitations ended. The man who had been her anchor was suddenly gone, and the absence was a gaping wound. For years, Melissa cut him out of her life, a decision born from deep hurt. She was now navigating young adulthood in Hollywood, dealing with her own career, relationships, and struggles with addiction, all without the man she once relied on for everything. Through it all, she secretly wished he would reach out, but the call never came. The silence from his end was deafening, reinforcing her feeling of being abandoned. She admitted that in her darkest moments she longed for his support, but he wasn't there. Publicly, Melissa maintained a loyal front. When asked what Michael Landon was really like, her answer was always the same: a warm smile, followed by, "He was wonderful." She felt she needed to protect the myth of Pa Ingalls for the millions who adored him. Admitting the truth, that their relationship was broken, that he had deeply hurt her, felt like a betrayal. How do you square the deep love you feel for someone with the profound disappointment they've caused? For years, Gilbert buried the pain. She shared the happy stories, the fond memories of life on the prairie. It was a defense mechanism to keep the more painful truths away. But that silence came at a cost. She wondered if their bond was ever as real to him as it was to her. The years of silence were not a peaceful parting. They were a long, unresolved chapter of heartbreak. For years, the rift between Melissa Gilbert and Michael Landon seemed permanent. But time and mortality have a way of changing things. The first thaw came in 1990, nearly a decade after their falling out, at the wedding of Landon's daughter, Leslie. The event forced them into the same room. They spoke, they hugged, and according to Gilbert, the years of awkwardness and anger just washed away. It was a fragile reconciliation, but it was a start. That peace became critical just a year later. In the spring of 1991, shocking news broke. Michael Landon had inoperable pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis was a death sentence. Leslie Landon called Melissa personally to tell her the news before it went public. Gilbert was gutted. "My first thought was, this is horrible. I'm going to lose a mentor and father figure," she recalled. "I'd already lost my own father. I was staring down the barrel of losing another." She didn't want to intrude on the family's private